and 701 Main Street, Lexington, Kentucky. Conference room C. The purpose of the meeting is rezoning recommendations from the Revisions Committee. Now I call the meeting to order, and I will turn it over to Dr. Allen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, as a sixth grade teacher, I really would appreciate it. I'll forego that this afternoon. Thanks to each of you for being here today. What I can tell you, having rejoined Fayette County in January, is that sitting alongside of the room and at each of the tables is just an incredible group of citizens. A group of citizens representing a very diverse, a very broad spectrum of our community. A very thoughtful group, a very deliberative group, a very resourceful group, a group that's been thorough and reflective. They've been very determined. They've been punctual and attentive and have looked at thousands of pieces of information. They have been very inquisitive about details. They've helped all of us who are actual employees of the district, I think, to be better employees, because we've actually had to look at information and remind ourselves of policies and procedures, programs, and protocol that perhaps we had not looked at for a while. So we thank you for that. We thank you for your commitment to making our community to be the vibrant, healthy community that we know that it is, and to help it to be better. The process has been very interesting. In fact, I've said on a number of occasions, it is a process that I believe that warrants other districts looking at it for its thoroughness. Again, not perfect. I don't know of any perfect world, but every time I've come here, I've thought of the JFK quote when he was asked in 1962, why do you want to try to put men on the moon? And he talked about the fact that he wanted to do it because it was hard, not because it was easy. And because when something is hard, people have a tendency to draw deep and to draw wide and to come together in a way that sometimes is not possible when the challenge is not hard. So I think this group is very reflective of JFK's quote, and I think they're just a wonderful group of individuals. And so with that being said, I want to turn the meeting over to our illustrious chair. Ellen Stein, I think by all accounts, has been an incredible leader of this work. And again, it was not hard. He perseveres along with the outstanding members of the committee. So I turn it over to Mr. Ellen Stein with a great deal of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Helm. John, Mr. Chairman, and fellow board members, we come to you today basically as a resource. You have asked for the Citizens Committee and group that you put together for us to determine ways, first and foremost, to populate the new schools that are coming online here in Fayette County. And while we were at it, you asked us, what the heck, why don't you take a look at the whole thing? And so this committee of citizens, all volunteers, all committed to the goals we have set before us, have come today to discuss with you and illuminate any particular points of interest for you and how we made determinations for the plan that you have before you. It looks daunting, I know. I'm not sure any of us could, by ourselves, even lift them up. But I will tell you that every single one of those pages, documents, maps, represent probably 20 pages for each of those that we have worked through to get to this final recommendation for you. Yes, I can do that, and will. So, yeah, and I will tell you this, we've read every dadgum page of it. I hope you will too. As this process has evolved, we've learned a lot of things about ourselves. We've learned an awful lot about our school system and how excellent it really is. Interestingly enough, we've also learned a lot about our fellow citizens in our community. And what we know is that we have an awful lot of committed and passionate people who care about the education and the stewardship that you have for this wonderful public school system that we have. So on behalf of the 43,000 students and teachers and principals and administrators and the hundreds of thousands of people who have contacted us with their advice along the way, we present to you this packet of materials for discussion and recommendation for your consideration. If we could, Mary, where are you? There you are. If I could get Mary Wright to kind of walk through what these materials are, which may take more than a walk, maybe a canter. And then I anticipate, Mr. Chairman, that you may indeed have some questions. What I'd like to present to you along with these materials are our additional recommendations, and with a quick comment about that, and then we'll be glad to take whatever questions you have. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Alan. I promise you I'm not going to walk you through every page of that. I just want to tell you what you have. In the two large binders, you have copies of the agenda and minutes for every meeting. Additionally, you have all of the Let's Talk information, as well as summaries of input sessions, and I think every bit of information that Alan said that the committee has had privy to. So you can see that firsthand. Secondly, in the smaller binder, you have a series of maps, starting with potential residential development, and then behind that there is information on enrollment by school. It shows by residents, people who are living in those areas, how many are attending. It also shows private and homeschool students that live in those areas. And this is all information that the committee has to consider as we were walking through this. Then it moves into, for elementary, high school, and middle school, maps that show the current boundaries as well as various scenarios that were developed over time. Some homework David's demographics did for us along the way, as well as each iteration by date for each of the different levels. So you can see the progression that the committee took as they made their deliberations and came up with their final recommendation. But unless you would like for me to walk through all of those pages with you, I feel like this probably gives you the history, and certainly as you have an opportunity to look at it more closely, if you have questions, I know that committee members will be happy to answer, as well as over the next couple of weeks, if there are additional questions, we'll be happy to respond to that too.
Hey Mary, one quick question for you. Is there any significance to the green and the red dividers within maps?
Only that they are dividers between the different levels, elementary, high school, and middle school. Secondly, I would like to talk a little bit about the process and the role that David's demographics and planning had in helping the committee. As you may or may not work with demographics for a number of years to do our districting and to help us with our demographics. So that relationship was already established before we started into this process. Scott Terbucci has been our right hand as we've worked through this, because I think during this process we were able to, the committee was able to make, ask questions and make recommendations, and most of those could be addressed on the fly. So he has the capacity
to move areas around to see what the impact would be in terms of school capacity, in terms of the ethnic makeup, the socioeconomic makeup of schools. So that's, I think, really real-time opportunity to have some of that information help as this process goes along. I think it's been an incredibly deep dive into how our community is structured and what we've asked to look at in terms of the guiding principles for our schools. And really, I should let the committee speak to Scott Stevens because they have direct contact with him. But I would like to say a personal thanks to him because I think that his efforts have made this whole process much more transparent and something that allowed the committee to respond to immediate concerns quite promptly so that we were able to provide, I think, the recommendations the committee has come up with, provide the best possible recommendation that they could come up with. So, with that, Scott, I'll turn it over to you. I don't know if you can have seen the agenda, but you are to do an overview of the redistricting process.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I would like to go through just quickly some of the things that we went through, the process that we've gone through, the data we have, because I think that's very important to know the amount of data and analysis that we did down to neighborhood and street level, really. We looked at the individual students. And also I want to say, and I've said this in the committee, but I also wanted to congratulate you all on the fact that this is one of the most open and thorough committees I've ever been on, and I am currently sitting on 4 committees, and I've probably done 25 to 30 in my career. So this is you guys have done a great job. It's been a really, really enlightening, and I will be using it at other districts to show them how that I think it should be done. Now with that, let me tell you about us a little bit and our philosophy. We've been doing K-12 school district planning for over 30 years. We have clients throughout the United States. Our main philosophy is that we do planning based on residents of students because school enrollment doesn't necessarily reflect the area demographics. School enrollment can be influenced by a lot of other different things, a special program at a school, a principal, a teacher, things that are more easily to move or change quicker than where actually students reside. Also, when we're planning for new schools and projecting out 5, 7, 10 years, we don't know the choices those parents and students are going to make. Are they going to choose their local resident school? Are they going to try to transfer to another school? So we do everything based on residents. That's the way to do facilities-based planning, is look at the residents and make sure you know where they, what's going to happen in the future for the residents-based. So let me just quickly start here in some of the data. This is a different district, but this is what I showed the committee the very first time we met with them. I showed them this basic idea of what we're doing so they understood what they were going to be getting into. So we start with a street database. It's got the basic information of streets, the address range, street codes, names, that sort of thing. From there, we break the district into what the current attendance areas are. So each of these color-coded areas are the current attendance areas. We further break the district into what we call study areas. Each study area is coded to their current elementary, middle, and high school. Each study area is based upon major roads, railroads, power lines, drainage, rivers, things that are natural, easy to identify areas of split. They're also based about maybe 50 to 75 K-12 students per area. That allows us to then look at these areas down to an individual study area and figure out how many students are there, where they're going to school, any special information that they have on there. So your district has, I think, approximately 600, a little over 600 study areas that we've broken it up to. We then got a download from the city of the student data. each of these dots represent at least one student. From there, we have all their whatever in your student information system, their address, any special ed codes, any reason for transfer reasons, English proficiency, free and reduced lunch. This way we now can look at an individual study area and get some of that information. And again, I can zoom in and look at the individual street and see where those students are going, and if they're whatever their demographics have to say. The city also gave us development. This will help. This is for our forecasting in the future. This has got the project name, the type of housing, single family, multifamily apartments, a status of it, if it's currently going or if it's going to be going soon, and then a phasing schedule. The phasing schedule is the important part because we want to know when those units are going to come online so we know when those students will be coming out of those units. And again, that was given to us by the city. The city was very helpful in giving me data to work with. So when we're doing our forecasts, we do it by all the 72, by each individual study area. We have 4 years of historic data. We graduate the 12th graders. And then when we do a forecast, we base it on 3 different factors: kindergartners, residential development, and mobility. Now, mobility does measures the migration of students in and out of the district, and I'll get into that a little bit more. With future kindergarten classes, we look at and we got the data by county, the number of births, and the number of kindergartners 5 years later. You see from this chart, there's a definite correlation. As births rise, kindergarten students rise also. So that's how we get the future K classes for your district, and we got that countywide from the county. Mobility measures the number of students in and out of a district. So if we have 100 students, first grade students in a attendance area, the next year we would expect to have 100 second grade students. If we don't, you would see that it would be either 95% or something like that, or it might be more. And what it does is it measures the move in and move out from the current housing. We don't really know the reason why. It could be somebody transferring to a private school or vice versa. It could be somebody moving into the district or moving out. It could be somebody that just moved in within the district but into a different location. The timing is more important than what's behind it. So we look at that for each attendance area to see if you're gaining or losing students from each individual grade. And this is important because it's done for each study area for each grade. And then finally, we've got that residential development. We get a student yield factor, and what this gives us is a number of units. We apply a student yield factor, and we're able then to estimate the number of students that will be coming out of that development for each year for that study area. And this is just an example of one of the district-wide projections we've done. We do that out 7 years. We look at the K5, 6, 8, 9, 12 numbers and go from there. We also then do this down to each individual attendance area, elementary, middle, and high school. You'll get the number of resident students that are in each one of them. So I talked about resident students a lot, and one of the things I believe you have is an attendance matrix. The attendance matrix is important because it lets you know where your students reside versus where they go to school. So if you look at the Palm Elementary School, you can see on the very right side there's 683 students residing in that elementary school area. If we look down here, there's 612 students attending it. But this number here, this 336, that shows that there is only 336, about 49% of the students that live in the area attend the area. So you can see that there's a definite correlation or disconnect sometimes from the students where they live and where they're going to school. You've got 138 students that live in Palm that are going to Sundance, 93 that are going to Anaheim, 14 that are going to Tournament Hills. And then vice versa, you've got living in or going to Palm, you've got 63 coming from Three Rings Ranch. That's important because the enrollment or attendance can actually mask where you need. In this example, we're looking at consolidating a school. So from total attendance, you could see that Sierra Vista is the one that you would probably go in and look at to consolidate. It's got by far the lowest number of students attending it. But if you look at the total residents, it's got the second high, or it's got a much more residents than Magnolia. Magnolia only has 376 students in the residence, but 627 students attending it. So they're similar to that Palm, where they're getting a lot of students, 300 students almost, from out of the district. So if I would suggest looking at Magnolia for consolidation and not Sierra Vista. That's the importance of residence versus attendance. They're not necessarily linked together. There could be a disconnect. So with all that data, and I'm trying to go fast, so please tell me if I'm going too fast. With all that data, we can then do this what-if scenarios. What I've got here is looking at a current middle school attendance areas. I'm going to play what-if scenarios. So what we've done is we see Mountain View has 892 students and San Gorgonio has 1,064. I'm going to grab some study areas and create a new middle school. This new middle school I called New Middle School. And that yellow area now is the attendance area for that new middle school because I grabbed all those study areas in blue. From there, we could see now the number of resident students in Mountain View went down to 542, San Gorgonio went down to 917, and the new middle school has 497. Now, I can do that for what's there currently, and then out to that 10-year projection, that forecast, and that's exactly what we did. We would look at how things were currently, and then we'd compare it to what it is in the future. We can then do this and do it individual study areas. I can move one study area at a time, and that'll tell us what the number of students are in the area. And then with that data we got from the student file, the free and reduced, the special ed, those kind of things, we can then see what that does to the percentage that's there. So we also looked at 1 mile walk distance. I think we wanted to get all the students within a mile walk distance to go to their school of residence. So this example, this is 1 mile around Three Rings Ranch Elementary. I've selected them, and I can tell you that there's 1,500 K-12 students in there, 694 K-5, there's 125 fourth graders, 398 go to Three Rings Ranch, 146 attend Palms, and 18% are English language learners. So we've got all this data behind there that when every move we make, we can go down and look to that level of detail on what we're doing. So the first thing I did after I showed this and then our next meeting is I put together some scenarios. And these scenarios were based upon some of our modeling that we do here. And I'm just using, we started with high school, so I'm just going to show you what we did with high school. your current attendance areas, the capacity of each school, and the number of students residing in each. And then on the right side there, there's the percentage free and reduced lunch. So I did this. This was what's currently going on. This was our baseline. One of the models we do is doing closest school. So each study area is assigned to the school that it's closest to, but it doesn't take into account any the capacities. So you can see, like in this example, Takes Creek is at 143 capacity, and the proposed high school's at 63, and Henry Clay is at 55. So this was one of these are theoretical things that we showed the committee. We also looked at doing and getting it to a fewest number of changes, and that's what this one came up with. So we really didn't do many changes. I just basically put in the new high school and filled it up, just taking from Henry Clay and from Bryan Station. But then what I did is I filled each school to their capacity. So all the capacities are under 100% if you look on the right there. And this is what this came up with. And again, I was trying to take the closest study area to go to this closest school. I mean, each school will have its closest study area going to it. And then we tried to do a balance of free and reduced lunch. These were all of these base maps that I was giving them. This is where I started with to see where we wanted to go with. So I was trying to balance between 60 and 50, 46, 60% free and reduced lunch at each school. And this is what we came up with. And we could see that it put some schools under capacity and some pretty over capacity. And then excuse me. There we go. Then we distributed the free and reduced and keeping it all under capacity. So this is what we got here, and we made at this point we looked at it and said, wow, we're making a lot of changes here. I mean, and these are pretty ugly attendance areas. There's a lot of gerrymandering here to get this to work. So just so you can see what we've done, I also provided the district, and I apologize, that was wrong. I also provided it with these maps of each individual study area, and in that study area, it's got the number of students in there with the number of K-12 or 9-12 students in there, and the free and reduced lunch. So the red is over 50% free and reduced, and the green is less than 50%. So when we're doing this, we could see where those pockets of students are. So after all that with high school, we started in scenario B. And this was just making some adjustments here and there. In high school, we started with scenario B, and we went on to a C, D, E, F, and I think we ended with G. And we did adjustments here and there for each one. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to show you at the end the final product. We did the same thing for middle school, and then we started to do the same type of process for elementary school. And what we decided to do is have me come up with a draft scenario for elementary. This was my draft scenario for elementary. What I did here was try to keep everything under capacity and as balanced with free and reduced as possible. The committee immediately rejected it because we were moving about 7,000 students, and it really did make some serious changes to all the attendance areas. So from there, we went through the same process we had before. We started with A, and we actually had an A and B on this one. So we didn't make as many changes here. It was only affecting 2,000 to 3,000 students, and most of those students were, or a lot of those students were actually going to one of the new schools. We did an A and B and a C. When we were at C, we wanted to do a scenario D based on based more on the guiding principles from the board. So we started with C. We want all students 1 mile walk distance to the nearest school. All attendance areas should be free reduced lunch less than 90%. I chose the 90%. And keep attendance areas, resident student population as close to capacity as possible. So I started with C. I then identified the study areas that are within 1 mile of each school site. And I made sure that those study areas within 1 mile of a school went to that school. So you could see some of these here, like if we look in the middle here, these were in 1 mile of a different school that they went to. I made the change. So like Booker T. Washington, this area was in Harris, but it's closer to Booker T, so I changed it. So that was our first step. But then I looked at the free and reduced lunch, and these schools were still above free and reduced of 90%. So I then identified those areas that are less than 90% that I could move to one of those schools that needed to be moved to. So these were less than 90%, but they were outside of 1 mile from each school. So again, if we use Booker T. Washington as an example, I took these 2 study areas and put them in Booker T and came up with this. So I was able to get all of them under 90%. But then what that did is you could see our capacities went way up. And so some areas are over capacity, but couldn't be lowered because without going over the 90%. So I attempted to reduce the capacity. I made some changes to these study areas and came up with this one. And this was scenario D, where I was able to get some of these well under, or not well under, but less than what they were before, but still trying to keep it all under 90% of the free and reduced. So we started with D, with C. We got all study areas to 1 mile. All areas were below 90% FRAM, and we got the population as close to capacity except for those ones that we couldn't move, and came up with scenario D. From there, we brought it back to the district, or to the committee, and they came up with the subsequent scenarios where we would actually go in there, we'd make a change. Somebody would ask, okay, what happens when we move the study area 3 to school A? We would make that change. We discussed it. Mr. Stein would ask if there's a consensus. Do we want to keep this change? And then from there, we would either change it or go back and start over. And there was multiple times where, you know, we would work on it for the 2 hours, moving 3 study areas here or there, 2 study areas here or there, and just spent a lot of time looking at each individual scenario. So we came up with multiple iterations until we got to it. Scenario K is what we've done. Is this our elementary scenario K? So we went through all of the alphabet except up to K. For middle school, we got to scenario J, and you can see again the data there for the capacities, etc. And then high school, we got to scenario G. And from that point, we pretty much said, okay, this is as good as we can get at this point. We've done as close as we can to the guiding principles. Some of the guiding principles weren't necessarily easy to reconcile with each other, but we did as best we could, and that's when we came and said, this is, here we go to you guys, to the board, and to get your input. So that was the process in a very long nutshell. Is any questions or how we want to continue from here?
Scott, thank you very much. We're going to have, I'm sure the board members will have some questions for you. It was pretty interesting as you were reviewing our process, this little stroll down memory lane. One of those moments along the way. It should not go without saying how immeasurably important Scott and Davis demographics have been to our process. They gave us all the information and well beyond that which we needed in a professional and a timely manner. Scott has kept an even keel all along the way, even when we were doing 50, 60, and 70 different scenarios in a 2-hour period. We could not have done this without Scott, and I think the committee is unanimous in their support of me saying that you were vital to our success here, and we appreciate all that you have done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Don't go away.
I'm not going anywhere.
This process, as Scott just related to you, school board members, has been arduous and very detailed. We do not know the real numbers, how many hours have been put into this, how many meetings we have had, how many different scenarios, in fact, that we have looked at. We do know that it is well in excess of 1,000 different iterations of different plans. So we have tried to be as thorough as we could possibly be. It's probably important to note also how incredibly important the staff has been. Dr. Helm, all of your folks have been just extraordinary in their work and guidance and leadership. I don't want to point out anybody in particular, but Bob has been in my ear all along, and that's been extraordinarily helpful. Lisa stayed after every meeting with me so that we could get our communications out to the key stakeholders all throughout our community, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate her efforts on our behalf. And Hannah did everything I asked her to do. Even got me water. So everything has moved very smoothly amongst this group. And I will say this before we turn it back over to you, that the attendance here today of our committee is voluntary. Asked as many folks to be here as could, but as they have all throughout this process, well over a year now, hundreds of hours committed to this process. They're all here. As I look around, I count of our 24 members, we have 21 here. 2 of them couldn't be here because they're actually principals, and with the extended hours, they couldn't get away today. And one just got appointed to the city council, and he has a city council meeting. He didn't want to miss that, having just been appointed. So you can see the level of commitment, and it's been this way all throughout. It may have something to do with the promise of cocktails afterwards, but they're all here today, and we certainly appreciate everyone's commitment to this process. The last thing I'd like to share with you, I'd like to call on our Vice Chairman, Aaron Manna, to share with you very briefly, and and I'll come back to the explanation for it in just a second, some additional recommendations that we have made for your deliberations that may, in the end, mitigate some of the questions that you may have about how or why we made decisions that we did. So, Aaron, if you could just briefly share those.
So our suggestion for implementation for elementary schools would be to have that happen in 2016 when the 2 new schools are open and ready to go. And for middle and high school redistricting lines to go into effect in 2017 once the new high school is built. The reason we have middle schools waiting that long is because Carter G. Woodson is currently housed at Crawford, and so we couldn't bring in a couple hundred more students into Crawford where there's already tight space. With regard to grandfathering, we would like to see all students involved in the Spanish immersion programs grandfathered into the Spanish immersion program because some of them are only for the students who are districted there. However, our recommendation is that if any student leaves the Spanish immersion program, he or she would go to their newly districted school. We would like for redistricted students to be able to enroll in their new schools as early as 2015 through the out-of-district process. That would be subject to room at the school for students who are currently districted there. And we would like to see a reason on the out-of-district request form for this request, and parents would be responsible for transportation. Finally, with grandfathering, we would, not finally, second to finally, we'd like to see students in grades 5, 8, 11, and 12 be grandfathered into their current schools. In the event that a student is an incoming 10th grade student redistricted to the new high school, we would also like for them to be able to remain at their current school because they could not district themselves early because the school isn't built. And finally, siblings of students in grades 5, 8, 11, and 12 would be able to remain at the current school if they are already enrolled and attending. So preschooler could not be grandfathered in because they're not already enrolled and attending. When they transition to the next level of school, they would need to go to the newly districted school. We have 2 suggestions for programming. We would like to see Ryan Station High School house an IT magnet program. Ryan Station High School has the lowest enrollment based on residents, and so we hope that this would attract students from around the district and impact the overall capacity and free and reduced lunch numbers. Additionally, we would like to recommend that Crawford Middle School would house an arts magnet program. It would not eliminate the need for expansion of SCAPA, but it would give more students who are artistically gifted a chance to participate in programs geared toward their strengths. Crawford is currently districted at 97%. The average enrollment for middle schools is 108%. So this would alleviate overcrowding in other schools and improve the free and reduced lunch ratio as well. And our final set of recommendations falls under funding. We would like for resources to be allocated for low-performing, high-poverty schools to have full-time family resource centers. We would like to see a full-time preschool operated in or near high-poverty, low-performing schools. At the very minimum, we would like to see enough early start spots to accommodate all free and reduced lunch 4-year-olds so that they enter kindergarten with appropriate academic awareness. We would like to recommend that schools who have greater parent involvement and lower free and reduced lunch numbers be encouraged to establish partnerships with other schools for fundraising and volunteering. And I know that as a result of this committee, that's already happening with 2 schools in the district. And our final recommendation would be to lower classroom sizes in low-performing, high-poverty schools on all levels to allow for more specific, differentiated instruction for students who are already performing below grade level.
Thanks, Aaron. Let me anticipate your first question, and that would be, why the heck did you all go outside your scope and offer these suggestions? Our answer to that would be one of the things that we learned early on in this process was that many of our schools were being impacted by concentrations, if you will, of poverty, and they were having impact on achievement in some of our what are scored as lower performing schools. We recognized as a group early on that redistricting was not going to be able to solve all of the problems that are created by concentrations of poverty. We recognized that the way people live in our community assuming that we stay true to the principles that, the guiding principles that you gave us to examine, that there were a lot of things that we were just not going to be able to be successful at. We could not get a perfect plan. So in a deal that we made with ourselves, basically, was we're not going to disrupt the entire community. We're not going to make wholesale changes that would require transportation issues and movement of students all over our district to satisfy some unannounced goals, whether it be capacity, travel, free and reduced lunch numbers, whatever that might be. But we recognize that we'll put a perfect plan together for you. We could make some recommendations that would go beyond what redistricting could do. This report that you have before you is from the entire committee. There is no minority report. There is no addendum to what we're going to be offering you today. We did take a look. Some of our members have taken the extra time to take a look at what some of the final results are of some of the changes that we've made and their impact on particular issues, most specifically socioeconomic diversity, free and reduced lunch being the manifestation thereof. You'll find that some of those numbers and analyses that were put together by members of our committee, this entire committee, have been presented to you today in terms of an additional resource to let you know where we are and how we got there. At this point, we would like to turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee, not just me, in fact, probably not me at all. The committee is here to answer any specific questions that any of you might have, recognizing that you too, along with us, have been contacted by members of our community, citizens who are passionate about what this process has been and the results that are attached to it. And so we want to answer any of the questions that you might have before you begin your final deliberations and make whatever changes you might want to make or not in this second. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we turn it back to you.
Thank you, Alan, and thank all the members of the committee. We appreciate so very much all the work you've done. I think, as Scott told us, this is a very open process, a very thorough process. I have heard from lots of constituents, and I know that you have looked at every issue. I don't know how you could have done any better job than you did in terms of looking at every issue that's brought to you. I also understand that it's not possible to please everybody, that you have to put in the last piece of the puzzle, and I think that you all have done just a super job in giving us a plan to consider. I think the next step would be to see if any of our board members have specific questions about specific areas for you, and I'll let them go first. Questions or comments?
Why is everybody busy? Okay, we'll get out of line here. But I would like to also echo John's comments and Dr. Helm said about the work of the committee. I had an opportunity to serve with you guys up until December. So I have an understanding of all the issues you guys had to tackle as we went to the listening session, hearing from the public around what some of the concerns were, and trying to be able to do a job of saying, okay, here's the guiding principles. But in terms of the guiding principles and where we are, how can we really come together around collective thought? I mean, sometimes it's debatable type of thought to kind of come up with a plan. And I want to commend you guys for taking out the time. I mean, I can't imagine the last 2 months in terms of all the meetings and the sacrifices you guys have made. But I will say this, I've had so many people come to me and say, you know what, this process that you guys put in place, the transparency of it all, being able to have the feedback and go in and listen. I mean, they enjoyed the process. And I think people can appreciate that. I mean, as far as what John John said, someone may never like totally all the outcomes, but I will say that I love the process of having people from the community who have various lenses, you know, in terms of their experiences, their networks, et cetera, coming together and look at a plan to present to us what I think is a well thought out plan. So I just want to say personally thank you all. So now my questions, okay? There are a couple of areas that I just had some questions for, and as I look through the maps and listen to some of the comments. My first question is, I look at the Ticks Creek area, and I'm looking at a little small section that was pulled out in the Mill Creek area to go to Veterans Park. And I just want to understand a little bit more, why was that particular change made?
So we looked, is that okay, Ben? Yeah. We were looking at free and reduced lunch numbers with that. Veterans Park was one of the 3 elementary schools that had very, very low free and reduced lunch numbers. The students in that area are part of the pocket that's currently being bused to Southern Elementary School. And a portion of them are within walking distance to Mill Creek. The part that you say that you're speaking about would need to be bused somewhere. They're not within walking distance to Mill Creek. And our thought was that that was an area where we could try to even things out a little bit with regard to free and reduced lunch. And since the students were going to need to be on a bus anyway, it wasn't that much further to go to Veterans Park from the area than it would be to go to Mill Creek.
And I was one of the proponents of that, and I just feel like taking that cluster of high and low-income children and sticking them in a low-income school, it didn't make sense to me. So I was going to keep it as honest. By them being at Veterans Park, Leanne McLaughlin, principal, has said that when you have these schools with a high free and reduced lunch, it's like a triage or an ER, and you have 15 kids in that room, and one room to need help. So why take more kids who maybe I intend to be helped and sitting in that school of their life that they can get? They can be better service and better smart. And I was always fought for that. I wasn't the only one, but I was.
I was also one of the ones who was pushing for that to be made. And when you look at what it does to the numbers, when you take that block and put it back into Mill Creek, it significantly raises the number of free reduced lunch there. And it just kind of makes a small impact at Veterans Park. Also, when you look at that area, it's never been at Mill Creek. And I won't say never, but in the past 10 years or whenever the last redistricting was, it was already out of Mill Creek. So it did not disrupt their normal flow. They were already on a bus going to a different school outside that area, so putting them on a bus to a higher achieving school is just a win-win.
You can understand my question when we want to talk about
being
able to walk, because you don't see it happening in the reverse.
Yeah, so where that pocket is, they are not in walking distance to Mill Creek. So they were going to be on a bus, whether they were on a bus to Southern or Veterans Park or Mill Creek. So, and they were already on a bus, and that area has been bused outside of Mill Creek for the last 15 years. So we didn't really make any significant changes to the area, just their possibilities.
And how many students are we talking about in this area?
54, I think.
54.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're talking about
At the elementary.
and where are they now?
Southern.
And then we do have those kids also going to Southern Middle School with all of Veterans Park instead of going back in and going to Ticks Creek, so they would follow their peers.
We had also received feedback from, I remember, like a parent that's down at SBM at Mill Creek and several other people that were concerned about moving those areas into Mill Creek, which already had a high free and reduced lunch rate. So it was also a response to those public concerns that were shared with us.
Okay, I understand.
I might also point out that this was a part of the plan approved by the board in 2002 that just never got implemented.
Okay, all right. I just have one other area that I want to kind of get to, and I want to get one other board members. I think some of these areas of concerns that we've heard about are in our particular district. So the next one I want to talk about, can you walk me through, because we heard a lot of comments at the listening session that we had last week regarding Squires Oak and Honey Hills and around the decision that was made. Can you give us a little bit more light, shed more light on that for us, please?
And I'm Can I piggyback on that? It's just kind of, as we look at the feeder pattern consistencies, because I'm seeing some feeder patterns that don't quite match up. So if you could just kind of expand in that Honey Health area and then
Anybody who wants to say something? There.
All right,
Coach, there you go.
at the middle school level, if I'm remembering correctly, correct me if I'm not, we've changed it because E.J. Hayes was terribly overpopulated, and this was an area that was close to Taste Creek Middle where we could alleviate some of that congestion and overcrowding at Hayes. Initially, we also looked at changing the high school, and what we saw was that moving it from Henry Clay to Taste Creek basically just flipped the overcrowding situation at those two schools. So at that time, we said, all right, the middle school change makes sense from a capacity standpoint, not at the high school. What changed was when we got our projections later in the process. And what we saw was that under the plan that we had developed, Henry Clay was still very overpopulated, particularly in relation to Taste Creek. And so in examining the feeder pattern and trying to keep those kids all going to the same schools, the decision was made to move that from Henry Clay to Taste Creek. Did I get it?
So not to oversimplify, but it really is. You know, you have a couple of schools that are underpopulated, you have a couple of schools that are overpopulated, and you can balance those out by making the change. And it did fit in, not to challenge your thought about the feeder patterns, but keeping them all together, going to Taste Creek Middle and Senior made sense in that piece of the feeder pattern.
And we also looked at our very, very last meeting about what would happen to the numbers if we did put them back into Hayes, and I think it threw Hayes up to like 130% capacity, 125% capacity, and that wasn't a number that we felt very comfortable with.
And I know this has not been officially determined and the contract signed, but knowing that there will be a middle school in that area, Squires area, was that taken into consideration or explained whether it was taken into consideration, and or was it discussed that would that cause those students to be moved twice?
Let me, before anybody answers that, let me just as an overview, Ms. Bacon, tell you that our thinking in knowing where these new schools are coming, but they're not on our agenda, was sort of esoteric. And the middle school is even more so than what we know about where the new elementary schools are going to be. And so I think David O'Neill, it was the David O'Neill principle that if we didn't have a signed contract for the land, we didn't consider that. And we just sort of did it in a nod. We know it's going to happen. We're hopeful, but we don't know when. And so we did not do our projections based on that. Now, anybody wants to answer that? I'm sorry.
I would just add, we did talk about, even with the new middle school, it'd still all be over capacity. And so we looked at that. We talked about the issue in terms of, you know, if we're going to have to leave some more over capacity than others, they should be in that area where the new middle school is likely to be. But when we got down to it, it was just that we didn't know for sure that there was going to be a middle school there. So.
And even leaving the middle school over capacity at 133% capacity for 3 years is just too high.
And you may have already said this, that would have put Hayes at 137.
Like it was going to be between like 130 and 133% capacity if we were to put that area back in to E.J. Hayes.
And what does it do to Taste Creek Middle?
It kept it, I believe, right about where we needed it, around the 108% mark. Because the 108% mark is what we were aiming for, because the total capacity for all middle school students with the middle schools that we have would put them all at 108%.
What was the number of middle school students involved in that? How many students?
Scott, can you help us with that, Scott?
number of middle schools?
I don't have that. Yeah, I don't have that right off my hand. I could look.
I thought it was over 70 students. It was a significant number, because when we looked at some areas where there might be 20 students or 14 students, 9 students, 11 students, sometimes we could make moves just based on the fact that we know that the current number of residents in the area is not always the number of residents in the school. So if we had 9 kids, we could say, okay, well, it looks like it might be 110, but we know it's going to be around 105. But it was so significant a number, we could not do that.
So was that middle and high school?
I know that was in Hayes.
It was middle, the number that we...
The middle school, Ms. Ferguson, I think was 72, if I remember correctly. Bob's going to find it. We'll find it here in a second.
And I guess I should ask if in our package of information, Lisa, do we have the map that shows the number of students in each individual study area?
That's being printed right now.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to ask. Does anybody know what number some study areas are? Because that's just one area that we've got lots of community. And you mentioned that when the projections came in, because I think there was a concern, although everyone's very complimentary to the committee's work, there was a concern that it would come late in the day.
It was.
When the projections, did you projections late?
We did. Those particular projections we got one of our last months of meetings.
Okay.
It was introduced into our process on March the 9th.
Okay.
At that meeting, it was discussed, and we made decisions at the next meeting, and the citizens who contacted you are correct. Then we had spring break, so it seemed like it was a last-minute deal. So we actually made 2 additional runs at that in our last meeting with the committee, and did, in fact, take another look at it, because we wanted to try to be fair to those citizens, and our conclusions were the same.
So, Alan, in the committee, because you heard a lot of concerns, you guys have emails as well. There's nothing that you have heard that would change your decision around how you decided to go ahead and allocate the students in terms of...
You're talking just about that area?
Yes, that area in particular.
Mr. Love, I'm not sure what you're asking. If you're asking us to relitigate it...
Well, let me just say this, Alan. A lot of people said they didn't have a chance to be able to state their case.
Well, I appreciate that, but indeed they did. We have examined it, and we went back to it twice based on the significant number of citizens who were interested in it. We did actually even take a vote. If you look into the minutes, at our last meeting, the very last thing that we did was vote on that particular issue again, and our conclusion remained the same. Sandra?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this area also, when we came to the feeder pattern, one thing we tried to do is we could not follow it. We could not have like 2 schools going into one high school. In some areas you could, some you could not. So we tried to, if it was a small amount, at one elementary school, a small amount, we tried to, if it was half and half, we didn't worry about it. Like one, if the school is split between 2 different high schools or 2 different middle schools, as long as it was a good number, half and half, that was fine. But if it was like 20 kids, we try to keep them with the rest of the students. And in this area, didn't most of that area go to Tates Creek anyway from Squires? And that was one of the other things we looked at. It was such a small amount that we included them with the rest of the area to go to the school. Does that make sense? No.
I don't think that's quite accurate.
Yeah, I don't think that's right.
The general principle was right, that the committee focused on the idea that if there's 600 kids in an elementary school, you don't want to have 50 go to one place and 550 go to another. And this was Squires turned out to be a school where about half of them were going to Tates Creek Middle and Tates Creek High, and about half of them were going to Edith J. Hayes and Henry Clay. So the committee came up with a clean line that split Squires, and it had all the kids who go to Squires Middle go to all the kids who go to Tates Creek Middle go to Tates Creek High, and all the kids who go to EJ Middle would go to Henry Clay High. In round terms, half and half. And the numbers that you were asking for earlier,
No, we're talking about the blue here, which, yeah, anybody say that?
Yes.
the numbers requested earlier, it's about 80 kids at the middle school level in the Squire, Oak, Honey Hills area, and close to 100 kids at the high school level.
And Bob,
80, you said 80?
Yeah, okay.
how far is it from Squires Oaks, Honey Hills to EOJ Hayes?
7.5.
7.5, how far does it take to move?
Between Henry Clay and EJA, the one before it's 7.5 to the other school is 5.5.
Okay.
According to the Google map.
Okay.
And they're 2.5.
So it's
So that's,
closer,
that factored into my.
okay, so it's closer to Tate's Creek.
Yeah, so I close this.
Distance has not always, I know the school board members told us that there were no special priorities in the guiding principles, but we sort of made some ourselves. And when we're talking about distance of an extra mile, if it's already 4, 5, or 6 miles, we really need to take that into consideration. So frankly, although it is closer, that was not much of our consideration. It does take a little bit in terms of transportation. Ms. Ferguson, do you have anything?
Really big concern I've heard, what we've all heard, which is specifically in my district, is the LTMS, Ashland, Belcourt, Kenwick, Fairway issue, and I guess they're conflicting issues of the people that understandably don't want their school split between two, don't want the elementary school split between two middle schools, that being Ashland, whether all of Ashland goes to LTMS, just that whole issue, and then
Well, there's really 3, because a third of the school kids from Ashland actually end up at Winburn and Westbrook.
oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, so,
But in terms of the neighborhood,
right.
the neighborhood is and just how that came about, I guess, how that was in Fairway, so that it looks like Morton is a little closer, and just in terms of the neighborhood school, you know, there are issues about how far they can walk to school and all that.
When we looked at that, we looked at the 3 guiding principles. We looked at capacity. The projections for Morton were to be over 120% a few years down the road. So we looked at capacity, we looked at feeder pattern, and we looked at effect on free and reduced lunch. And moving those neighborhoods to LTMS satisfied all 3 of those guiding principles. It kept the kids together, except for the ones who are going to Winburn. It lowered capacity to something more manageable at Morton. And it improved the free and reduced lunch numbers at LTMS with the neighborhood district students.
So in terms of, I guess the concern being distance, how far Fairway is from LTMS, that was not
That was kind of like what Alan was saying. With the Squires, it was down on the list, right?
And then I guess just at LTMS, the enrollment or the capacity, does that automatically receive a reduction in the number of magnet spots? And
Yes.
and part of the
It does. It does.
and how many? And I guess where did that?
It's almost an adjustable number,
Okay.
actually, from year to year.
I mean, I don't know how we've determined it in the past, and I
Right.
guess,
Well,
does anybody know where that is?
In the past, it's been based on capacity and applications, that the school has a capacity of about 730, and about 200 students live in the area. The enrollment, the number of applicants to the area, to the program 8 or 10 years ago would usually exceed the spaces available, the 500 spaces. Lately, it is not. Lately, the enrollment has been approaching 600 and is projected, I believe, below 600. So the committee concluded, well, let's have a attendance area that's around 400 instead of 200. And it turned out that they ended up recommending 450, but there's still space for at least 250 magnet kids. And lately, the magnet applications have been down in the 400 or less specific.
I mean, those are, and I don't know if you know this, but I mean, those are the numbers I would be interested in is, are we going to be kicking out, in effect, magnet kids? Is it going to, the balance has always been that there were enough magnets, but whatever was left after attendance area, right? That's what you're saying. Okay. So, and I guess I would just like to see have we turned away applicants, or are you just saying that the applications have gone down?
Lately, we have more slots available than there are applicants.
I think part of the thought, at least on my end.
To be fair, though, that's at a different number.
Right. I mean, what do you mean now?
Well, with more neighborhoods in the school, there are going to be less available magnet slots. So that's a different number than that which has been used previously to determine how many slots would get filled.
Right, and that's what I'm asking. What effect is it going to have
So
on
there
the
has
magnet, and are we even going to keep it as a magnet?
The thought on my part is that it would almost make it more competitive, because right now, if you apply, you can get in. And to me, it seems like there might be more of a draw if it was a very strong magnet program that you had to be, demonstrate exceptional skills
Right, and that's what, I don't
to
know
get
about
in.
the criteria right now. But,
Right. Well, a lot of that is you guys get to determine what you want to do there, but keeping the feeder patterns and all the kids together was really important, but one of the overriding factors in that final decision had to do when we got the 2018, 19, and 20 projections, and Morton went through the roof. So we had to take kids out of Morton. That's it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, are you next, or do you go last? What's your protocol?
My questions were about the money can just far out.
Okay.
Those were been addressed already.
Okay. Thank you.
And in my area, if you could explain I understand that Beaumont is extremely overcrowded. There seems to be a feeder pattern inconsistency with the neighborhoods of Plymouth Heights, Plantation, and Copperfield going to Jesse Clark. And they are the only group going to Jesse Clark, and then they'll come back and go to Dunbar. They would like to stay at Beaumont, whereas there is an outline or a change closer into town that they can go back to Jesse Clark. We've had a request from the principal that at Beaumont to let the kids come. They're a high-performing school and they can handle the numbers. We are adding on a little. And I'm just concerned about that feeder pattern inconsistency from the middle
We'll be
school.
glad to answer that question. As an aside, and we love our principals. We've met with them specifically a few times. However, I think that an awful lot of principals in our system had an awful lot of ideas about what they wanted or could handle in their schools. So very candidly, while we took that into consideration, it didn't become a guiding principle for us as to what a principal who happens to be in the school today, maybe not tomorrow, next year, or the year beyond, would make a decision about. So,
Then there go back.
especially when it blew up some of our other guiding principles that you all gave us. So,
What about the feeder pattern?
well, I'm glad to let anybody else know.
I think that was just a sacrifice that we made for capacity in that particular instance. Originally, we had switched that area to Lafayette to keep it consistent with the feeder pattern, and we heard a lot of feedback that people were not pleased with that, and so we made that particular adjustment at the high school level. It worked with the capacities that we were given. It made sense from a transportation standpoint. It was a lot easier to get to Dunbar from those areas than to get to Lafayette from those areas. But when we looked at the middle school, the transportation was not as significant as a barrier
back to Jesse Clark, which is the Laurel Hill, Sherrill Lane, Lynn Road, Chandler, Shaker Drive, Parkway. And maybe
I can sure
Can we use Harrisburg Road as a natural boundary? Use 68 as a natural boundary?
not on this map. Because it would have been Harrisburg Road and then come in to Clayton Mill Road a little bit.
Can
I'm on the middle.
you put the map up?
Yeah, I'm on the middle school map.
Middle school there, Jesse?
I think the area you're talking about, is it all on the northwest side of Harrisburg Road? Across from Pickett-O?
No.
Is it both sides of Harrisburg
Yes. Oh,
Road?
you're talking about the area, yes.
The inside, yeah, that's what he was referring to.
Oh, yes.
That up in that vicinity near Pickett-O, the committee chose to have Harrisburg Road be the major boundary between, or the major edge of Beaumont.
We spent a lot of time looking at those particular areas.
I think it's fair to say that that's one of the more difficult areas of town to deal with, in all of the schools that are there.
If I might add one comment about the feeder pattern, what the committee's proposal does now is it keeps all Stonewall kids together going to Jesse Clark. Plantation, well, just at the elementary to middle school transition, all Stonewall kids go together to Jesse Clark. All Clays Mill kids go together to Jesse Clark. Then, when it gets to the middle school to high school transition, yes, most of the kids at Jesse Clark go to Lafayette. But this does have a sizable number of kids who've in effect got to know each other for 3 years, then that chunk of kids, 200 I believe, go to Dunbar. And in all fairness, Garden Springs and Clemens Heights doesn't work as cleanly. But at least for those two examples, Plantation and Copperfield, it works in its own way well.
Melissa, is it also Dogwood Hill? Yeah, Clemens Heights and Heights.
How many kids are affected at the Copperfield area, those neighborhoods?
We can grab those numbers for you.
While you're looking for that, the area that she talked about, the Shaker Drive, that area that got moved in, I just kind of want to see what the numbers are.
Sure.
Copperfield is about,
What's that whole steady area of Copperfield, Clemens Heights, and Dogwood Hill and Plantation?
Copperfield's about 60, and
Talking about the Copperfield Neighborhood Association area? It's in purple here, right?
Mm-hmm.
at the middle school level, that's about 60, and Plantation is also about 60, and then Wyndham and Clemens Heights are about 86. So altogether, it's about 200.
206. Using those numbers, it's 206.
Okay, how about those areas that got taken out just for that? Yeah. Well, that.
Yes.
Yeah.
They got taken out of Jesse Clark and put into Beaumont.
Right.
33 plus 22.
So just getting out?
Yes.
Wow.
There's another portion that got taken out of Jesse Clark, which
Put
is
into
more.
Morton.
That's 66.
While you may or may not agree, do you get the answer?
Did it.
Okay.
We'll just look.
That's our purpose here, to answer the questions. We understand is making recommendations that you folks will make the decision.
Just to be, we moved him. We did that. We spent a month pretty close to it trying to get these kids in the right spot. And if you move one area, then you've got 3 more that have to do. So this is just about as good as we could get.
If there is a domino effect in the community, it's right. You're
Stepping on it.
You're right.
So why do those 2 groups gonna have to get moved out of Jesse Clark? I mean, I'm just looking at the yellow, the part that's gone, that was moved to Beaumont, and this part that we moved to Morton.
Now, purple, yeah.
But then, I mean, was Jesse Clark really reduced? Just looking at the map, that's what it, or no, it picks up more.
I think that's more of the area that
Towards down there. No, towards, or no, looking at
it comes from both directions.
current red. I mean, it looks, just on the map, it looks like the area was really reduced. Yes, that, the yellow. Right. It's been really reduced.
You mean geographically?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, and that's what it,
That might be.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
There's more kids in our area.
You just
I mean, I
have-
understand the domino, like if you take these out and move them to Morton, then you have to move more into Jesse Clark. So it looks like Jesse Clark moved this way. You moved out to Beaumont this way and out to Morton this way.
You're assuming the numbers are always the same, though. Like in that particular scenario we just looked at, we moved 55 kids out to move 200 in. So, I mean, it's 150 different. So just because geographically it looks different, a lot of times, like around campus, there's very few kids.
Yeah, I'm not assuming that, but that's what I'm asking, though. So that's,
Yeah.
so it is an overall 115 games.
Yeah.
So that little area, that red line.
Right, so it's
And
150.
that's only,
Like Bob, the numbers Bob just gave us, you know, down here was 200 kids and up here was 50. I mean, it's 150. That's different.
Yeah, you're looking at that little yellow
so
area.
that's only like 60 kids.
Mr. Barnett?
God is, I think we know this at the meeting, Old Bridge. I think there's references to being 4 kids.
Yeah. You're right. We got approximately 32 comments and letters per child. I'm not kidding. I don't know. Per child, assuming there are 4 kids here, and that's all our numbers show.
That's the biggest family, I guess.
You know, we looked at it a couple of times.
And that came in at the point where we had decided that with Rosa Parks' numbers, we weren't going to move anyone in, no matter how small the city area was, without moving somebody else out. And so it became the, you know, where do we move out to move in, even though it was only 4 kids, they were at 123%.
We did end up with a doctrine, if you will, about ACE, K's, and Rosa Parks, that we just weren't going to put any more kids in those areas without extracting some. And the extraction, then you're getting into other neighborhoods. And you don't have, for example, a 4-child neighborhood anywhere else. And so, you know, that's what we settled on.
We also had the transportation issue with buses getting in and out from Firebrook. It made sense for the kids in Old Bridge to be transported with those kids rather than the kids from Palomar.
Oh, also, Old Bridge is ending up attending the same 3 schools that they are right now, so there was no change to them ultimately.
Yeah, that's
I think the thing that got me on the comment was some folks said that it was actually part of Palomar.
Well, it's included in the Palomar Neighborhood Association, I guess, and that's why I was moved by the information about transportation. Is you got buses going past there to get kids that are not in Palomar. So the Palomar buses would have to come out on the Harrodsburg Road and go around into Old Bridge.
Okay, I don't know the area that well. Is it connected to the Palomar neighborhood?
No.
Okay.
But it does connect into the neighborhoods
further out the libraries and all the other things They made a very compelling argument to us at the public comment section last week about being involved in the Palomar neighborhood. That was compelling, but it didn't really have much to do with redistricting. And so, you know, that'll be in your hands to make a determination.
I think the largest factor here is that we didn't change them. You know, they're going to the exact same school that they're going to West now. They've never went to Rosa Parks. So the fact that they're not redistricted to Rosa Parks shouldn't really be that big of a focus.
Well, that's a good example of many of the comments that we've received about how damaging it can be to a child to move them from one neighborhood to the other, unless it's a school you want to go to, and then there's no damage at all. So,
I'll just say this, it was an honor and a privilege to work with each and every one of you. Not only my service on this committee, so I appreciate each and every one of you.
thanks.
I guess the other area that we got the most comments about is that area on Nicholasville Road that was districted to Glendover, that is now districted to Picadone. And we had used the railroad tracks. Have we used the railroad tracks as that natural boundary for kids going to Glendover? And it, you know, it's pretty compelling to me, especially when you're dealing with Nicholasville Road traffic, just zipping over to Glendover as opposed to going down through Waller or up, I guess, by the Rosemont Gardens. Is that like 7 Sons area?
Yes, it's 7 parks, you know, Cherokee Park, Goodrich, and that whole area. From South and drive up to Wall.
I mean, did that make much of a difference in free and reduced lunch at either school? And then I don't remember Glendover being.
We were really looking for capacity to go to Picadone.
And we also determined that you have to get on Nicholasville Road regardless whether you're going to Glendover or to Picadone. So either way you're getting out on Nicholasville Road. In fact, it may even be safer to just turn right on Nicholasville Road and try to cross it.
I could get there without going.
We eliminated a large pocket of what we refer to as a non-contiguous area out near the county line, between Manawar and county line, that was being bused to Picadone. And once we eliminated that non-contiguous area, we were left with a huge capacity hole at Picadone. Right.
I guess my question, I don't know if it's about, wouldn't necessarily be in that area, but as the board moves forward and discusses and deliberates, can we get, and I guess it's just a staff, any type of transportation study on what, if there's a difference in as far as cost?
Well, I mean, we can tell you how much it costs for a bus. Of course, it depends on how many kids are getting on in that area, how many buses the challenges we have right now.
So,
I guess can I respond to that a little bit too? It's not just how much we're saving, how many miles we're saving, but we took all of that into consideration, and some of the other changes that we did not make would have added mileage. So you've got that delta between there that is really the impact.
But I think what you're asking is like just like that first plan was if everybody went to school within a mile of their home, because you have to be a mile or more away to ride a bus. So if you just did that, obviously that would save us in transportation, but I think what you're saying,
It would save you a lot.
You
probably have to close 5 schools.
We're killing you on
That's why we were against the neighborhood. But I'd be curious too to say now with this proposal how fewer students are going to be needing transportation, or do you figure it's going to be a loss?
We don't have that data.
I mean,
I don't.
I guess we're asking
serious note of walkability. Even in areas where we know logically people don't really walk. I mean, there's not many first graders going to walk a whole mile to two neighborhoods. But nevertheless,
I was funny about the people emailing that want their child to walk to school and then you see the car line all the way
I would just add to that, one thing you don't know is if the board decides to accept our recommendations in some form on grandfathering, if those people are providing their own transportation to stay at their current school, that's going to have an effect on this as well. So you can't predict that.
at least for 2 years.
Okay, I don't know if I have it straight, the feeder pattern issue with fairway back to LTMS. We've had several different scenarios there. So right now, does all of Ashland, that's the magnet program, all of Ashland attendance area go to LTMS?
Yes.
Okay, so Fairway, where is Fairway Elementary School? That's Breckenridge? Fairway?
Ashland. We think it's Ashland.
Okay, I'm sorry, so they're not going forward, that's right.
That's right.
Okay, so all of that goes to Ashland.
So that actually
And then they
becomes a
continue.
perfect figure pattern.
Okay, and then they continue to LTMS, but then the other issue that I forgot to was the high school feeder. Does LTMS, how many high schools?
LTMS, of course, has a large magnet population, but with this proposal, it now has a large number going to the new high school, a large number going to Henry Clay, and a large number going to Lafayette.
None to Bryan Station.
Correct.
They never, okay. But does Fairway then go back to Henry Clay?
Henry Clay.
Yes.
So we find all the right of that.
Is it possible that a student could go to, like, say, Paul Number or take free from LTMS because they may be a part of that package program?
Correct.
But it's
that's
correct.
Sure.
So they can really feed into all of our high schools.
Oh, absolutely. But that's the same with any
Any of the magnets.
the special or academic or magnet programs. They're redispersed, except for the recommendation that we made about Spanish immersion.
Sure, understand.
That's another one of those, you want to stay with your friends between choose not to.
Right. Oh, yeah. You're not required to go if you choose not to. What's from one of those programs?
I think I've got it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we've answered your questions so far.
Sure. I mean, and this is in response to, we can talk about the recommendations you guys had with the board. And well, first of all, because I mean, that's like really thinking outside the box, because the plan itself will not solve a lot of our problems. I think one of the things that we had an opportunity to hear in some listening sessions was some of the concerns. And as we were reading the book called Leading for Equity, it talks about, and I thought it was interesting when I saw the red zone and green zone schools are the areas of pockets of poverty in our area. It really says to us, of course, if we're going to have schools that are higher and free and reduced, one of the things that we have to do to make sure that those kids have a successful educational experience. And I think you guys have kind of hit on some of the things, and that is one about the allocation of resources in addition to like a family resource center. But also, what do we have to do to be able to make sure we have a staff that's trained and capable and have the support that they need to be successful with kids? Because if we're increasing our numbers in a certain school of free and reduced, and we're not fundamentally changing the way in which we educate our kids and provide services for our staff, we're somewhat setting those kids up for failure. Did you guys not agree with that?
We totally agree with that, Mr. Love. And in fact, this document that kind of points out some of those areas that we weren't able to address as well as we might have wanted to are absolutely directly related to those recommendations about resources and how we teach. And it's not our purview. We recognize that, but those things were very clear to us, and we thought we'd at least reintroduce them to your attention.
No, I think it's appropriate because we've got to grapple in terms we understand. I think one of the things this process has done is start to unmask some of the problem areas that we have, and people understand the struggle that we have. But there's a willingness, I think, on behalf of our community to come alongside and partner with us in helping in certain areas. You guys talked about the quote-unquote adoption of certain schools and sister schools and things of that nature. PTAs working together. So I think if we start thinking about our budget in terms of allocation of dollars, we talk about pre-K, you know, if we can try to address some of the issues we talked about earlier on with kids, it really will help eliminate so that people don't necessarily have to stigma of certain schools versus others. And my take is really about the fairness of saying all kids have an opportunity to a world-class education, and we have to live up to the promise of what we say. So I just want to say thanks, and I appreciate those, and I think it gives us at least some guiding steps forward in terms of where we need to go from a priority perspective. So thanks.
Well, I also think those recommendations make us feel like that we're all on the right page and that we're all on the same page. We're all on the same page. And with those recommendations, it feels like it's community support because it's coming from all of you. So that gives us a little leverage.
Well, the one thing that you'll note in the recommendations is we believe they're all doable. We don't know your budget. Well, we just we not really know what the budget is, but we think that just some reallocation of our current and future resources can address these things. There's nothing in there that's radical. There's nothing in that's asking for wholesale changes in how we do our business. We believe we're on the right track. We believe that every child has the opportunity to succeed in our public school systems. The system as it is. These are recommendations that might help us get there a little faster.
Thanks. Now, again, personal thank you for your leadership. I know I would always get emails. I would respond back.
Yes, you did.
And I would copy you and say, hey, you did. Feel free to share your feedback with Alan directly. And Alan was always good about responding. I can't imagine how many emails you had to respond to. But really, I thank you for your leadership in this particular group and just being a great champion for our kids in our community.
Thank you. It's been an honor. It really has been a privilege. My last comment is that we should all recognize the input and the contribution of our citizens. Listen, we put in a lot of time and hours, so have the public. And it's been colorful at times, I would say, but it has been extraordinarily important to our overall process in trying to get it right. So if there are kudos being passed around, I would say that the public need to be included to a very high degree. It's been a real privilege to do this. We're hopeful that we have helped impact the lives of 40,000 plus kids for the next number of years in Fayette County to even higher achievement. And we recognize how tough your job is. We're glad it's your job now. And we wish you well. And of course, as a resource, any or all of us, I'm sure, would still be available.
Well, we again want to thank you, and I think that our community, we're going to be asking for their help as we reallocate those resources to the schools in need. Because when you have a limited number of resources and you move them from one place to another, we're going to have to take resources away from some to give to others. But our community has said we want our kids to go close to school. We want you to allocate resources where they're needed. So as we take their advice and move resources, they're going to have to be patient and figure out how they, in some schools, have to look for other sources of resources to cover things that the board perhaps has covered in the past in order for us to shift resources to those schools that have the highest needs and the highest number of students with great needs. And so we're going to ask for the support of our community and appreciate your recommendation. Certainly appreciate all your hard work. I think you all have just done an unbelievable job in working through all the pieces of the puzzle. And on behalf of the board, thank you. Anything else?
I think we might need to make clear there's some misunderstanding. We're not voting on anything tonight. We still have to digest this and come together again and have some more discussion. So I think there was a misconception in the public that we were voting on this, and we're not voting on this right now.
Hey, it's your
will you be voting on this at the next board meeting? Or do you know?
Oh, you're asking me. I really was not on this month's board meeting. Anything, it would be the end of May at that board meeting. That would give us a whole, 6 weeks to kind of digest everything. And I appreciate and know that everyone wants closure. We do just as much as everybody else does. But I think to try to squeeze it in at the end of this month's board meeting does not give us the proper amount of time to vet everything.
And obviously, it's going to take time for us to study a year's worth of work. I mean, we've been in the loop to a certain extent, but just my reading material is going to take a little bit of time here. So we need. I know you've done a lot of hard work. We now have to do our own evaluation. What additional questions do we have? We need to listen to our constituents again, give them an opportunity to speak to anything we might propose to change. We're going to need a little time. I agree with Melissa. I don't think it'll happen before May.
Well, we appreciate the communication about what your thought process is. I guess it'd be nice to have invested a year, and it would be nice if you all said, oh, we're thinking this, like, just to have some idea.
We may have to get back together and ask you some more.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great, yeah.
Alan might not have counted the meetings, but I did, and this is number 36. But I would certainly come back for one more to see this through to the conclusion.
Yeah, I agree. But
Alan,
If I'm in the country, I'll be there.
No further discussion, questions, then we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Have a motion by Darrell, second by Amanda. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, nay. Now, thank you all very much. We're done.